Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in Good Springs. So, I've come up here to Good Springs, obviously quite an iconic location for Fallout fans, both in the game and in real life as well. So, we're continuing the Wasteland Ecology series by talking about the Mojave Wasteland food web, and it's back bigger and more complicated than ever before. There might even be a couple of surprises in here, like the fact that tarantula hawk wasps, the adults, eat nectar. So the Cazadors aren't attacking you to eat you, they're just doing it for the love of the game. Um, So, a quick reminder of the food chain and the food web and how that's kind of classified when it comes to ecology. So, trophic levels are where living things fit into the food web. So, the lowest level are autotrophs, which is organisms that can make energy from abiotic sources. Mainly, we're talking photosynthesis there, which are plants and algae fit into that category. And then we have the consumers, the heterotrophs. So heterotroph means they eat other things. So troph is about what things eat. Hetero means other, so meaning eating something other than themselves, kind of thing. So we have different categories of heterotrophs. We've got our herbivores. As you can see right here, we've got the bighorners who are sheep, so they eat plants. We have our omnivores that eat plants and animals, and carnivores that eat meat and other animal materials. Let's see. We also have different levels of predators. So primary predators, which tend to be the smaller ones that eat smaller kind of herbivores and omnivores and things like that. Secondary and then tertiary predators, and at the very top of the game you've got your apex predators, which have no natural predators. And you also have your carrier eaters, so they are animals that basically wait for something to die and then eat it after it's already dead instead of actively going out and killing things to eat. So that's kind of the difference there. And you've got your detritivores, which are your decomposers. So that's organisms that break down dead things, dead plants, dead animals, and release that energy back into the soil, and that gets taken up by plants. So the circle of life is a bit messier than what Disney would have you believe. And in the Capital Wasteland, same here, is that humans are no longer apex predators. There's no behemoths on this side of the country, but the Deathclaws are thriving and breeding. The other major difference is that the super mutants here are a bit more civilized for the most part and a bit more intelligent than the Vault 87. The super mutants in this side of the country are smarter and generally a bit more civilized. And that is because of their source. So the super mutants and the Nightkin that you meet in Fallout New Vegas come from a lot of them are left over from the Master's army. They come from that version of FEV, while the Vault 87 super mutants, the ones that we see in the Capital Wasteland, come from a different strain of FEV and they come from Vault 87. So there's kind of fundamental differences between them, which does impact their behaviour and presumably their dietary choices as well. The other huge difference, as we kind of talked about with the water, is that the abundance of plant life in the Mojave Wasteland is much, much higher, because the Capital Wasteland, obviously a lot of the plants were wiped out by the fire and the nukes and everything, and that didn't happen here. So there's a lot of plants, and the plants that grow here are adapted to the climate in the desert, they're adapted to the low rainfall, and they're thriving and growing well. So in terms of if you're vegan, you're going to do better in the Mojave Wasteland because there is more plant-based food for you than what you might find elsewhere. So I thought I would come here to Good Springs. So the other thing is, because the plants and animals are actually doing really well here, agriculture's an option. We'll talk a bit more about that later, but here in Good Springs, you just come out of there at the beginning of the game. And we've got maize, which is also corn. Corn and maize are the same thing, but just different names for it. This guy's farming. We've got some agave, and we've got the bighorn sheep as well. So people can, actually grow food. They can domesticate animals, which is how society started in the first place. Before, when we were still hunter gatherers, and then somebody had the genius idea of maybe we should plant these food sources and look after them, and then they'll keep growing for us. And the same with domesticating animals, that like, what if we tame these animals and keep them and protect them from other predators and things like that. And that's how society came to be in the first place. So we're going to switch to the big chart. So I have made another big chart for you guys with pictures and coloured arrows and all that fun stuff. So I'm just going to switch windows and I'll be back with you in just a second. Here we go. So yeah, it's a bit more complicated than the one that we had previously. So this is our Mojave Wasteland food web. So we're starting at the bottom, we've got all the plants here. So I have made some in-depth videos on all the different plants and things, so you can find them in the Science Fallout playlist and everything. So there's a lot of that. So I've kind of classified them roughly as kind of fruits, sort of. So mute fruit does exist, jalapenos, prickly pears, barrel cactus, banana yucca, maize and corn, and then grass. These, kind of related. And then our kind of nuts and seeds and things, the buffalo gourds seeds, pinyon nuts, pinto beans, agave and honey mesquite, and then the sandarroot and brock flower. Although they're not really food, they kind of make healing items, but they're still kind of in there. Presumably they do have some nutritional benefits as well. So that's all the kind of readily available plant life that we've got, and then grass and other plants as well, which is mainly what we see our bighorners and Brahmin eating. So they are our primary kind of herbivores. They're domesticated, although you do find the wild horners. I can't speak today. You do find the wild bighorners as well, but people have kind of tamed them, and they have them for meat and things like that. And then Brahmin, as always, was again one of the first animals that we ever domesticated. Was the bovines, and they have played a huge role in human society, and they continue to do so even after the apocalypse. And again, people keep them, they use them as pack animals as well as providing a source of food. So they tend to eat, it's mainly kind of fibre is the most important thing. So grasses and corn stalks and things as well. That's quite a common thing for a lot of farmers in the US to feed their cattle, I think, is corn silage, where they take the corn part gets taken away, and then the rest of the plant can be fermented into silage to feed the cattle, that kind of thing. You've got your mole rats, which are still present. Again, they're native to Africa, not to North America, so the likelihood of their origin is that they are from the pet trade, but they still exist, and they live underground, so they tend to eat roots of other plants and trees and stuff as well. Then we've got our giant ants, so the fire ants are there, the giant ants that eat a lot of kind of plant life. And as I said, the cazadors might be a bit of a surprise given how aggressive they are. But it's only the larvae of the cazadors that actually eat the tarantulas. They're a parasitic wasp, which means that they kind of lay their eggs inside a tarantula, and the larvae kind of then hatch and eat their way out. But the adults only eat nectar, so they're actually going to be feeding off the flowers and plants and things. I think I forgot to actually put the arrows on, and they definitely do eat nectar from the honey mesquite plant as well, the tree. So cazadors are actually herbivores, so when they want to attack you, they're just being aggressive because you have the audacity to exist in their vicinity. So that's fun. That's fun. And then we move up another level to the kind of primary predators. Rats are omnivores, so they come from presumably the brown rat or the black rat, but they are omnivores, so they'll eat just about anything. And they can eat fruit, they can eat vegetables, they can eat other insects and that kind of thing. Rats are very much omnivores. I've put fish. I'm not 100% sure on the fish species. It's not very clear, and fish is certainly not an area of expertise for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've learned a fair bit from playing Mega Aquarium, more than I ever did at vet school. Fish isn't something that they really spend a lot of time on. It's a very specialised field of veterinary medicine. We had a day of lectures from a guy based in Oban, which is kind of on the west coast of Scotland, and he's like the fish vet, and yeah, so I do know very little. I know basic anatomy, especially because, when my brother was younger, he used to go fishing quite a lot, but he's very squeamish, so I got the job of cleaning up the trout and everything, which I didn't mind doing. So yeah, I know a bit about fish anatomy, but my knowledge is limited. But different fish have different diets. They're as varied as any other kind of animal, but some of them eat kind of plankton, so zooplankton or phytoplankton. Zooplankton is like tiny microscopic animals. Phytoplankton is like tiny microscopic kind of plant type things, or the other fish or the aquatic plants. So, but they are swimming about in Lake Mead and in the Colorado River, so the fish are there, and they're a potential food source for a lot of things. We've got the geckos as well. They tend to be insectivores. Most gecko species will eat insects, so they probably would take on, the rad roaches, bloatflies if they can catch them, and the soldier ants and things. And speaking of, we do have, the bloatflies and the radroaches. They tend to eat just about anything, but they tend to also eat the dead things. But they do provide food for some other creatures. So that's the kind of primary heterotroph level above the herbivores. And then we've got lake lurks, who probably they originate from turtles, essentially. So the likelihood is that they eat fish in the lake and potentially anything else that happens along that they can take down, but they are carnivores, same as their kind of origin species are in real life. Other kind of carnivores on this level, we've got the giant mantis. So mantises are carnivorous. They're also cannibalistic. So they probably are eating other insects that they can get hold of, like the rad roaches and whatnot. And then we've got the spore plants as well. So they originate from Vault 22. They have a connection. They're probably some kind of mutated Venus flytrap. So they are going to exist in that level because you do have carnivorous plants. So these plants that eat insects and things. So they would probably catch the rad roaches and stuff like that. They have ways of tempting them. And then our scorpions. So there's two different kinds of scorpions in the Mojave. So we've got the rad scorpions, which are the ones that are emperor scorpions they came from. And again, it's not native to the area, so it's believed that they came from the pet trade and then they just did really, really well and survived. But we do also have a native kind of scorpion, which is the bark scorpion, and they've got bigger as well, and they have kind of a nasty venom. And they're going to be insectivores, so they're going to eat the giant ants, they're going to eat the rad roaches and all that kind of a thing. And then we get to the kind of secondary predators here. So we've got night stalkers and coyotes, both related. So night stalkers have basically merged coyotes with rattlesnakes. Both species are carnivores. They eat meat, so they'll eat smaller animals like the rats and stuff, geckos if they can get them. Mole rats, Brahmin, all that kind of stuff. So they will eat all these animals if they can get their hands on them. The dogs and the cyber dogs, not 100% sure about these guys. They, because they're kind of cyborgs to a degree. But there's enough organic parts there that they probably do need to eat something. So again, they're probably eating the, smaller animals, rats, geckos, rad roaches, whatever they can get their hands on. It kind of makes sense there. And then we come to the kind of next level up. So we've got our humanoid things, sort of. So centaurs are in there, and they probably eat dead things, eat whatever they can find. The spore carriers, we know, do eat people. Whether they can photosynthesize or not, we don't know. But presumably, they do attack, so they probably do have an omnivorous diet. Feral ghouls, same thing. Humans and ghouls, obviously, omnivores will eat different things and sometimes eat each other. Cannibalism is alive and well in the wasteland, just as it is in the capital wasteland. Some people are just into that, which wouldn't recommend it. Prion diseases are no joke, and they are potentially, you know, apocalypse causing infections, horrible things. And then we've got the super mutants and the Nightkin, who I would consider kind of apex predators, although, as I said, the ones that are in the west coast that are in the Mojave Wasteland are not the same as the ones in Fallout 3. There's a fundamental difference between them because of different origins. These super mutants are a wee bit more civilized, and we also don't have any behemoths. Does that mean that the super mutants never eat people? No, they probably do, but they're maybe more likely to eat other animals instead of humans. But I'm not ruling it out as a possibility. And then obviously we've got the Deathclaw. It's always going to be an apex predator because there really isn't anything bigger or more dangerous than a Deathclaw. Maybe a super mutant behemoth, but certainly in the Mojave Wasteland, the Deathclaws definitely sit at the top of the food chain. Because they are thriving in that environment. There's plenty of food for them around as well. And again, the more abundant food is, the more successful a species will be, the more their population can grow. So the Deathclaws are doing well, and we know they're breeding because if you go to Quarry Junction, you can find the matriarch with an army of little tiny ones, little baby ones following her around. So we know that the Deathclaws are thriving, and they do provide some pretty effective roadblocks in different places where they've decided to settle. And especially since they seem to have moved into the strip by 2296. Interesting one there. Never really got an answer on exactly how that came about, but it seems that they moved up from Quarry Junction, which was where, potentially one of the first places you might come across them in Fallout New Vegas is at Quarry Junction, but there are other places where they're known to be, and they'll eat, again, just about any animal that they can, but they probably would go out of their way to hunt humans if that was an option for them, so that's what puts them at the top of the food chain. I'll just zoom out. I love this software, by the way. It's called Obsidian. For any kind of research, planning, stuff like that, it's really, really good. I use it for planning all my novels and everything, as well as planning for these videos. And you can have a lot of fun making these kind of charts and things because you can move stuff around as well. It's, yeah, highly recommend it if there's anything along these lines that you do. But yeah, that is, and we have a bit of a symbiosis between the giant mantis and the spore carrier plants. They kind of work together almost, and that's something that's kind of known, that they help kind of feed each other essentially, which is interesting. So that's our food chain for the Mojave Wasteland. It's a bit more complicated because there's more stuff to put in it, because we've got all the plants that produce food. There's more creatures that are potentially edible and that eat each other, that kind of thing. Obviously, the Yaogwai don't feature here because they don't exist in the Mojave Wasteland. But when we get to talking about Zion, because my plan is, once I've done the main games, we're going to go and do some of the DLCs as well. And Zion Canyon is a slightly different biome, so it's going to have some differences, and one of those is that the Yaogwai is present, the bears are there, but there aren't any in the Mojave Wasteland, so they're not included here. But there's a lot more creatures, and there's a lot more edible plants in the Mojave Wasteland, and just like the fact that there's a lot more clean, fresh water, the presence of all this fresh food is what's contributing to the success of the settlements in the area. There's still dangers, obviously, the death claws and fiends and all the rest of it, but food is more readily available, not just for the people, but for the other animals as well. I'm sorry, I forgot to put my phone on silent there. So, food is readily available for the animals, which means that they're going to be in greater numbers, which in turn means that they're going to provide food for other species that can then be present in greater numbers. And because the soil is generally fairly clean, there's just not as much radiation around, which means that crops can do well. Rearing animals for food is going to go well. It's just all around going to be more successful. Agriculture, as I said, it's the backbone of society, and it's a way for us to use nature to our own benefit. And farming and ranching is feasible in the Mojave Wasteland in a way it just isn't in the capital wasteland. There's a lot of food producing plants that are adapted to the climate and the environment that grow well. And the animals, the bighorners, which are even bigger than before, so, bigger animals provide more meat. It's, kind of well known that that's the thing, because if you look at the difference in size between a beef cow and a dairy cow, it's quite substantial, especially there's some cow breeds that have double muscling, like the Belgian Blue, the Charolais. Now here we go, I'm digging back to 20 years ago when I started vet school. But, it's all kind of works together, because there is that cycle of life and then the cycle of death as well. So we do have our, dead things that are eaten by bloatflies, radroaches, the carrion eaters, and then broken down by fungi and bacteria that return to the soil and go into the plants. And it all kind of follows this cycle. So it's probably changed from what it was before the bombs fell, but on the whole, the Mojave is more successful, and life is doing a lot better in this region compared to the capital wasteland. So it's very, very interesting, and having some of these unique creatures, these unique insects and things. There is obviously some unnatural things. The death claws are not natural. The spore carriers and the spore carrier plants are not natural. Cyber dogs are not natural. Your cazadors are not natural. I mean, the tarantula hawk wasp is native to the area, but the cazadors have been specifically genetically engineered to be bigger and more dangerous. Your night stalkers are definitely not natural. They're not a natural mutation either. They were, again, created by mad scientists by combining rattlesnakes and coyotes together to create a very confusing mix of snake and dog. I've done videos on all of these creatures, and you will find that in the Science of Fallout playlists, and then I think there's separate playlists for different kind of sections of the Science of Fallout on the channel. So if you haven't checked them out and you want to know more about these species, how they came about, what is kind of unique about them, then I would recommend checking that out. But yeah, it means that, ranching and farming is a realistic occupation in the Mojave Wasteland, and it fuels the economy as well, because if you're producing more food than you need, then you can sell the excess, make a bit of money, and it all feeds into the local economy, which again is doing a lot better compared to the capital wasteland. There is more kind of money. I mean, money is a social construct. It's, that's why we switched to using bottle caps, because it doesn't really matter. You just need something that's kind of available, but not too easy to kind of create, so that you can use it as a currency. But it just means that the area is generally doing a lot better. So that's us done with the Mojave Wasteland for now. Next up, we are going to talk about the Commonwealth. So we're going to dig into Fallout 4's environment. And that should be really interesting, because we do have, a bit more variety in terms of the biomes. The glowing sea, then there's the kind of swampy bit to the south, you've got the kind of seaside, the coast, and then into the city, and then up in the kind of northeast where it's into like forest and stuff like that. So quite a lot to talk about there. And there's also more crops and more creatures in Fallout 4 than there is here as well. So be prepared for the food web diagram to get even more complicated for that one. So that should be very interesting. So hopefully you'll come back for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I upload twice a week with semi-regular video essays. The next one is on its way. I'm just having to deal with some issues with the subtitles, the captions, so that's going to take a bit of time. So I'm hoping to get that up by next week. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.